Dragons, massive winged reptiles capable of destroying entire cities with their ability to breathe fire. Rumoured to have a strong connection to magic, these creatures could destroy entire armies and forge new empires. Dragons were very powerful and useful allies to say the least, which, in turn, made them scary foes. Capable of being tamed, the beasts could be flown into battle. However, their numbers slowly dwindled over the years, leaving just a few remaining which were possessed by House Targaryen. The house used the creatures to conquer and unify the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros around 300 years before the War of the Five Kings, but 150 years afterwards the dragons died out, rendering the species extinct. However, Daenerys Targaryen later miraculously hatched 3 dragon eggs, once again populating the skies of the world, for better or worse. Dragons were massive creatures with long tails and necks. Having a similar body type to bats, the beasts had 2 short back legs and 2 large wings in front. However, when dragons became extinct, their memory was often confused, with many artworks portraying the creatures as falsely having 6 limbs, 2 wings and 4 legs. They had claws and teeth which were just as long and sharp as swords. Because the beasts were reptiles, they were covered in scales. Historical dragon scales ranged in colour, with many being black, silver, red, gold, and even blue. Some of them only had one primary colour, but most of the time the beasts had a primary colour for most of their body, and a secondary colour for highlights in their wings, horns, and spinal crests. In addition, dragons had horns running down their backs, head to tail, which often also appeared on their faces, growing larger as they matured. When excited, or to appear larger to enemies, adult dragons had 2 sets of frills which raised. As forced carnivores, dragons ate any kind of meat, ranging from fish to sheep. They were also known for eating fallen men and horses when they were ridden as beasts of war. Fully grown adult dragons could actually swallow the latter whole. Before consuming, the creatures had to roast their prey with their fire breath. Dragons' flames could melt steel, crack rock, and, most terrifyingly, turn flesh to ash. Elder dragons produced more intense and longer-lasting flames than the younger creatures. The flames were produced by the intense reaction of 2 chemicals which were met through 2 tubes in the back of their throats. The combination of the volatile chemicals caused a directed jet of fire bursting from the creatures' mouths. To no surprise, their bodies were highly resistant to fire, especially to their own flames. Furthermore, the fire never harmed the dragon's mouths as it was ejected. Just like most other reptiles, dragons laid many eggs, which had to be carried by 2 hands due to their weight being as heavy as stone and their size being as large as a human child's head. Just like the dragons themselves, the eggs were covered in scales, which normally matched the colour of the baby inside. They proved difficult to hatch and had to involve some form of blood magic. Whilst in roaring flames, another creature had to be burned alive for the egg to hatch, a life for a life. In the wild, it was believed the parent dragons would offer some of their prey. However, human sacrifice also worked for a more synthetic approach. How dragons reproduced was forgotten during their extinction, meaning there were many conflicting rumours and theories. Furthermore, it was unclear how the mother guarded her eggs, if at all, and whether or not the father helped her do so. When dragons hatched, they regarded whoever was present as their parent, just like birds. Babies grew rapidly, from the size of a small cat when they hatched to the size of a small dog within a year. After 4 years, they reached the size of a small pony. Furthermore, their horns grew longer and sharper over their lifespans. Unlike most creatures, dragons never stopped growing. In addition, they could live for centuries, however most died in combat before they could do so. Valyrian the Black Dread was the largest of the Targaryen dragons, living for nearly 200 years, having a skull the same size as a carriage. 5 millennia before the War of the Five Kings, men of the Valyrian freehold learned how to ride dragons, using them as a weapon in combat. They used the creatures to forge an empire which dominated nearly half of the known world. Unfortunately, thousands of years afterwards, during the Doom of Valyria, where catastrophic volcanic eruptions obliterated Valyria, the entire Valyrian Empire was destroyed in a single day, as well as nearly all of their dragons. One of the Valyrian noble families survived, House Targaryen, who lived with the surviving dragons on the island of Dragonstone in the Narrow Sea. 100 years afterwards, Aegon I Targaryen and his sisters used the last of the dragons to conquer and unify the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. Generations passed where the Targaryens ruled with their dragons. However, 100 years after, all of the beasts died from old age. Though dragons were considered extinct afterwards, Daenerys Targaryen managed to hatch 3 eggs from the funeral pyre of her husband, sacrificing the witch Mirri Maz Duur. Recognised as their mother, Daenerys taught the babies Valyrian commands. Furthermore, she named them Drogon after Khal Drogo, Rhaegal after Rhaegar Targaryen, and Viserion after Viserys Targaryen. Though the largest dragon grew to rebel against Daenerys, the latter was able to use her babies to claim her own empire. With the goal of taking the Iron Throne, the only remaining Targaryen planned to use her dragons to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Now it's time for this week's question. How would you slay a dragon? Let me know in the comments below. Today's video was suggested by a commenter in the previous episode, so make sure you tell me what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and for more lore content including Game of Thrones, keep it locked here to the Kankazans. Though the wall was a barrier between the far north and the Seven Kingdoms, it had to be manned. The Night's Watch guarded the structure day and night. However, during the War of the Five Kings, the wall became heavily undermanned, reaching an all-time low.